Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio podcast, where we tackle the facts, debunk the myths, and provide real solutions to help you take control of your sexual health and confidence. I am Mark Goldberg, certified sex therapist and host of the show. For any men who are serious about resolving ED or other sexual challenges, we encourage you to visit our website, eiqmen.com. You'll find additional resources, and you can reach out to us directly with any questions. You can schedule a 15-minute complimentary Zoom call with myself or another member of the team. We are passionate about helping men like you, so please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. Today, we are joined by Ashley Madsen. Ashley is a board-certified physician associate and an international educator in functional medicine, longevity science, and performance optimization. With advanced clinical training from Stanford, the Institute for Functional Medicine, and the American Board of Anti-Aging Medicine, she blends cutting-edge science with precision-based care. She designs personalized health programs for high-performing individuals, elite athletes, and leading wellness centers. Ashley is known for creating data-driven, outcome-focused protocols that enhance vitality and extend Healthspan. Today's topic is biohacking, AI, and how that is changing the landscape of personalized care for sexual function challenges like ED. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. It's wonderful to be here.
So to get us started, can you tell us a little bit more, or maybe even define what biohacking is, and in particular in the context of men's health and men's sexual function?
Sure. So that's a great question, because I think a lot of people think it's an extremist sport. They think biohacking, they automatically think the wonderful Dave Asprey or Brian Johnson spending $2 million a year on his health, right? And really what biohacking comes down to is the integration of understanding your unique needs by still blending in cutting edge science, understanding how your environment affects you. So you can use wearables or even different regenerative structures in your life. So meditation, if it's stress management, if it's circadian rhythm work, but it's really a blend to make it personalized for your specific body and your needs, which is really what it's about when we're thinking about changing the trajectory of health. And when we think about men's health, and, every man, like at different stages of his life, right, with some different challenges that may be around, I think also understanding how different stages of life, stress, different areas in terms of our own hormone changes, where we live in the world. So if you're in the country versus in a high urban area where your environment's super toxic with, from water to air quality, that your process to enhance your health, which is your health span, how many healthy years you have on this beautiful earth, may look different. And so I think understanding how to leverage technology and do it in a mindful way that's not going to stress you out further, but it's actually going to create better understanding and education on how you might be able to help yourself.
Okay, so to help me understand this a little bit better, what would be like a good example of biohacking that is not necessarily part of traditional or conventional medicine? For too long, men have been told that pills, supplements, and devices are the only way to manage and resolve erectile dysfunction. If you are one of the millions of men who know that their sexual function and overall experience is not just physical, EIQ is here for you. Our one-of-a-kind, self-guided e-course is designed to empower you to jumpstart your process of addressing performance anxiety, building confidence, and enjoying sex again. No gimmicks, no pills, just real solutions for men who want them. Try our course today at erectioniq.com.
Yeah, sure. So again, it doesn't have to be for the ultra wealthy either. So some basic things about morning sunlight, red or removing blue light in the evenings to help with circadian rhythm. Other things about implementing photobiomodulation, which is red light therapy. That's very interesting right now. So it's red light and near infrared technology to help stimulate mitochondria. And for those listeners that might not know what mitochondria are, if you think back to biology, they're those little powerhouses of the cell, and we have them all over our body in every single organ system. And there are certain organ systems, specifically when we think about fertility, like in our gonads, so ovaries for women and testes for men, they're actually very plentiful, but also in our muscle mass, in our hearts, in our brains, or our liver, those are high mitochondria areas. So these technologies actually stimulate the energy or ATP production to enhance those organ systems and also enhance your energy, your cognitive function, your ability to, run up the stairs a little bit better, or recover a little bit better at the gym. So red light therapy is a big one. Some people go into doing some like hyperbaric oxygen treatments. It's a little bit more medical. And then there are things like even just tracking your sleep with a wearable. Like I use Oura Ring, but there's Whoop, there's Garmin, there's Polar. There's so many things that you can actually just see where your heart rate is, what your body's doing when it responds to your daily stress. One of my favorites is also the continuous glucose monitor. I love that little device. They're now available over the counter, and those can actually give you an understanding of how your blood sugar might react also to your food, to your fitness, to your sleep, your lack of sleep, and all of those little details. So those are some of my favorites that maybe people have heard of before.
Okay, that definitely is helpful. Now, you used the term health span,
Yeah.
and I'm going to ask that you differentiate between health span and lifespan, in particular, because I think this is going to be pretty critical to any conversation about erections as people age.
Absolutely. Lifespan is how many years basically we have on this planet alive, walking around, right? Alive on this earth. And that's really what traditional medicine is focused on, right? We're talking about how do we keep people alive. Health span is the understanding of how many of those years you're actually spent functional. And when I say functional, that's through everything that you love to do. So physical functionality could be sexual function, right? Could be cognitive function, but it's those healthy years of your life. And what our goal really is, and it's a beautiful paradigm shift that's happening right now, is to try to match your health span as closely to your lifespan as possible. Because right now, the majority of us are spending the last quarter of our years basically having to deal with medical ailments. Maybe we're losing our physical function, our cognitive function. Maybe we're not able to, enjoy sex. We're having concerns in those areas, not only in the boardroom, but in the bedroom. And so our goal is really to maximize and give you back the control and enjoyment of your life by improving that health.
Okay. Such an important distinction. So it's going to lead us into the next question that I want to ask, which is, where do you see the intersections between longevity? And I want to put longevity in that health span category, meaning extending those good, high quality years and trying to match them as long, right, as possible to the length of years that somebody lives and erectile function. So are there shared pathways or markers in terms of the things that people would work on to expand that health span that do correlate to or spill over into erectile function?
Absolutely. So we already know that we can use erectile dysfunction as an indicator for a man's cardiac risk, right? And the reason is we talk about the arterial diameter. So those blood vessels that go to the penis also, right? Those blood vessels for the heart and to the brain are actually a little bit larger. So when a man starts to experience erectile dysfunction, there are many different reasons why you've talked about this numerous times on your podcast, and it's important to understand that biopsychosocial approach. But when we think about if it's coming from more of a pathological or physical ailment, we want to understand, okay, is this a blood issue, vascular issue? And that can correlate to a man's onset of having heart disease, cardiovascular disease, or, basically there was actually a study in Australia that asked men who already had a heart attack, and they, again, it was a survey. So there's only so much good that survey is, but basically it asked men who had a heart attack, were you experiencing any challenges with erectile dysfunction, or in, maintaining an erection, not only just having an erection. And more than half of those men admitted to having concerns 3 years prior to their heart attack. And so we really use that as a barometer for these areas of our health. And as a lot of us know, that cardiovascular disease is still the number one killer for men and women in this country. And so we have to take that very seriously. And that it's almost like the canary in the coal mine, where we see these little indicators as, let's understand a little bit of a deeper issue where this might affect this person from a systemic standpoint. The other component, insulin resistance. So we have a metabolic absolutely crisis going on. And many times, in what I still see across the board, despite this wonderful education, is that clinicians are not actually testing fasting insulin levels. So they're looking solely at something called a hemoglobin A1C, which is really not a great marker for somebody's overall health, especially their metabolic health. And the reason is that marker is only about a median measure of 3 months of your blood sugars. And those can fluctuate throughout the day. They can be affected if someone has iron deficiency anemia, if they have megaloblastic anemia. But really what we can actually decipher is, if you look at a fasting insulin, you can pick up someone's risk even in their 20s, in their teens. And you can look at these levels and it's totally modifiable, which is why it's very important for men to ask their clinicians to order these types of tests, like a fasting insulin, and have them actually think about outside the box, what else could this be telling my body? Because metabolic syndrome can actually put us at risk for erectile dysfunction and sexual dysfunction as well.
Okay, so moving over into the personalized medicine space, okay, can you give the listeners like a picture of what personalized medicine looks like today, and maybe a little bit of future predictions about what like AI tools like may be incorporated, or how they might impact what personalized medicine looks like in 5 or 10 years from now?
Sure. One of the big hindrances for clinicians to incorporate more deep dive data is the fact is they don't know what to do with it or they don't know what to order, because we're very much trained in the algorithm of, you don't order a test unless you think it's going to actually change the outcome of treatment, or the fact is that this person's presenting with symptoms, so now you order the test. It's a very an algorithmic way, and thank goodness for conventional medicine. I bless. Like my first 10 years was actually working in surgery, which is probably the most reactive area of medicine, and it's there to save lives. But what personalized medicine has really shaped and shown is that you need to understand that each person is an individual. So even you've got two siblings, even if you look at yourself and you look at somebody the same age as you, the same, maybe they grew up in the same town, and you're like, well, wouldn't it make sense that we'd be treated the same? Or why is one sibling, suffering from maybe some obesity concerns, another is not? And it's not just so black and white where it's like, okay, every single thing is going to work. So what personalized medicine is, it understands what your unique needs are, what your challenges are, what your genomics are. So we have genetics. It doesn't mean that you're going to develop something. And I love genetics. I don't think they actually should be scary at all, because a lot of it can be controlled through something called epigenetics, which is that our environment, our choices, our nutrition, our stress, our nutrients, all will affect and communicate to turn up or turn down these genes. And that will also have an effect. So perhaps when I'm thinking about a supplement for you, let's look at the testing. Let's look at micronutrients. Maybe you don't need that supplement that your friend is taking. Or for you, perhaps you have certain risk factors, like you have an elevated biomarker like Lp(a). This is something called lipoprotein A. It's an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So even if you are in shape, eating the most beautiful diet, and you're living in great clean air and drinking pure water, your chance of having a heart attack is much greater than somebody who does not have an elevated lipoprotein A. So basically, you're looking at all of these data points and you're coming up with a plan for that person to help to either slow down age-related or chronic disease, hopefully reverse it if it's already started, or at least say, like, listen, you don't have to. You don't need to develop Alzheimer's. You don't need to develop this because there are different remedies now that we know that we can implement to stop that progression of disease. So I think it's really cool. We're leveraging AI is going to make it much easier because of accessibility. So when things first start, we always know that it's going to be a little bit more expensive. It's going to be a little bit more experimental. And, we're going to kind of figure it out. And it's very niche, meaning there are probably only a certain amount of clinicians that are going to be highly trained to be able to provide this care. AI is going to help leverage data sets and help actually funnel data in a way to provide insights and interventions for patients. But it needs to be still with clinician oversight. So I want to say this is that at the end of the day, it's still the medical provider who has to sign off on it, who needs to review it. But it provides a different checks and balances. So I find that it also helps that if you have a radiologist looking at an exam and then AI might disagree with it, at the end of the day, the radiologist is going to going to say, hey, this is my reading. But it may also offer a different perspective where that radiologist might slow down and think about it. Well, maybe this has a different pattern. The other thing is going to allow clinicians who are in areas that are more rural to have more data to help their patient. So we're looking at, family practitioners who are still kind of the one-man show or one-woman show, but they don't have these wonderful subspecialists like a New York City or a Miami, right? And they may have someone who presents with a condition where they can leverage AI, where it's pulling in sort of these subspecialists around the world to help actually figure out what's going on with that person in front of them and also think outside the box for treatment programs. And then you can also think about how it's going to move scientific research, drug development, understanding, perhaps cures, right? I hate to use the word cures, but yeah, it might actually help us find cures for things that we've never been able to do because it's going to really help us figure out and test things and look at viral load and really give us much more at our fingertips. But again, it's not supposed to replace us. And I tell clinicians all the time, I said, don't be fearful of AI. AI is not going to replace clinicians, but clinicians who use AI will likely replace clinicians who refuse to not. So I do think that personalized medicine, it's here to stay and it's only going to become better.
Yeah, again, it's very hard to predict where anything goes and what the future, but I would imagine that with more and more personalized medicine, it may actually in the end require more human to process through the data, help people sort through that, translate all that information and whatnot. So obviously over time, we're going to see where all of that goes. Now, how would you envision this playing out, let's say with a 44-year-old, let's say pre-diabetic man presents with sporadic ED? Like what would happen in a personalized medicine, maybe with, again, enhanced AI function? Like what kind of data is being collected? What are they looking for? And how might that impact like a treatment plan?
Yeah, that's great. Number one, it's probably going to allow a survey where a man might be a little bit more comfortable answering questions without staring at their doctor or their clinician in the face in a 15-minute visit. I think that where personalized medicine used to shine is that although it was more expensive, because it was more expensive, you had more time spending really asking those questions, really creating the relationship with your patients. And as you understand, and we talk about this, is that this is a very sensitive topic to many men. And so I think that just getting a good broad amount of questions and answers, because if you don't ask the right answers, you're not going to ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers to be able to help with the treatment. So I think it's going to really help with data collection. Then also it's going to help with, even based off of that symptoms, maybe saying these are some tests that you may want to add to enhance understanding what's going on. So now for me, I've been working in this field for 15 years. So for me, it comes naturally. I know I'm going to do a whole carb metabolism. I'm looking at lipids. I'm going to do a deep dive on LP little a. I'm going to look at all of these things. I'm going to look at micronutrient deficiencies. full hormone panel. I'm going to do all that. And then I'm going to think about cardiovascular scans. Maybe, he has a high LP little a, or maybe he needs to have a coronary CAT scan to look at plaque in his arteries. There's going to be things that come naturally to me that may not come naturally to a general practitioner or someone who might be the first line for this gentleman to see. And it's going to give them a better understanding. And as you know, also, there are many clinicians out there who absolutely have no idea what to do with hormones. And so their answer is perhaps, tadalafil or sildenafil, or, let's think about let's nip your nutrition in the way. You should really cut out those Oreos at night, and it's like, well, no, maybe that's not his issue. Maybe if we actually use a CGM and the AI can integrate and work into his life, we know that he's only sleeping 4 hours a night because he's actually has low T. And maybe, he has pre-diabetes, but it's making his low T worse. But absolutely, the low T is actually making his blood sugars worse. And so it's actually putting him at risk for cardiovascular disease. And you know what? He's having a really hard time at work right now. So, or he's doing this type of workout versus that, and it's not affecting him well. He's getting hypoglycemic at periods of time versus he's eating too much, right? Sometimes we actually see the opposite. There are different lifestyle things where it can actually be a coach and help that person have real-time feedback. Then it's also going to help the clinician understand, okay, what are maybe some ultimate or optimal biomarkers for that person? So this can also go off of data ranges. So if you are working with a men's health specialist who understands, urology and men's hormones extremely well, and they are able to put data sets of optimal levels, then maybe that practitioner would have access to it and say, you know what, this man, he really shouldn't have a total testosterone of 350. And even though the guidelines say less than 300 is low T, I know that's not true because we know receptor sites and people's optimals are going to differ across the board. So I think it's going to provide a lot of help to clinicians who maybe don't have that additional subset of training, and also made them think outside the box a little bit to say, you know what, I'm automatically going to write him that script for tadalafil, but I really should be looking at these other areas that we really should get in place of and help that person from a lifestyle standpoint, or help them with their stress and their sleep, which we know that I can give somebody hormones, but if they're super stressed, if they're not sleeping well, if they are living in a toxic environment where they're breathing mold spores all day, it doesn't matter if I give them metformin or if I give them some testosterone, it's not going to prevent them from having further decline in the future. And so I think it's just going to give us a better toolkit to assess and ultimately support our patients.
Okay, so let me raise a question/concern. I want to hear your take on this. So one of the things that I find as a sex therapist, I work with a lot of men in particular, but people in general with sexual function challenges. And when it comes to sexual function, the brain definitely has a very active role in the whole process. And many of the men that I end up working with, were convinced for a very long time it was biological. It's biological, it's biological. And they sort of exhaust the options that are open to them in terms of testing. And once that's all come back and it's largely okay, they're then comfortable, or they feel more confident to do the work with somebody like myself. But as I'm hearing about like the details of the personalized medicine, there's so many potential factors that could be contributing. That I could see this as being quite a journey trying to get all those things balanced and correct. But with conditions like erectile dysfunction, where the brain plays I think really an outsized role in comparison to other bona fide medical issues, how would a personalized medicine system account for the complexity of the arousal process and the actual thought processes and emotional experiences that are contributing to or hindering that natural sexual process?
Yeah. So, we actually, I talk about this a lot with women because this is something that I find very consistently. It's not always just a hormonal. There's a lot of stress, and there's responsive arousal, right? Spontaneous arousal, and it can differ also between men and women. And so I think that's really good. So when we think about neurotransmitters specifically, a lot of neurotransmitter work also relies on hormones, specifically testosterone, but also a lot of micronutrients and minerals, but also someone's experience. And I think that is really a good question because sex ed is terrible. There's no sex ed. What people are learning is really from either pornography or from the internet, or, at one point it was like books and magazines, but now it's really based off of what, social media or culture is teaching. And it depends on where you are, right? What your religious or cultural background and where that also might stem into play. I think also stress. I think stress is a huge component that's not talked about enough, especially for men. And I see this a lot in my clinical practice, where a lot of times what brings men to see me might be that they're like, I feel like, I'm not performing well. I'm having some concerns here. And then I said, okay, let's talk about it. What's going on. And a lot of times there's so much more of a root issue than, say, a blood test, right? And I think that some men think like, is there something wrong with me? Am I broken? Am I, this or that? And I think that providing in any time of situation where people can have comfort to explore what's going on or share. And I think that's why questions are really important, because I don't think a lot of us are actually educated on the multifactorial contributors to sexual wellness. And I know you agree with this. I think sexual wellness is a barometer for overall health. And it doesn't mean that you have to be, say, sexually active, but there's something to be said is that we think about it's actually a pretty complicated system, and that there's so many different things that come into play that we bring in with us to the experience. And even if that's solo, if that's with just solo sex or if it's with partnered sex, that really can contribute beyond just a plumbing concern. So I think AI can be really beneficial to provide a safe place for some men to be able to talk about it, and then questions, and then it actually creates questions off of previous answers, which is really fun. So there's more of these large data sets that are coming out, and it can actually predict and help and ask sort of those leading questions for men to be able to answer. And I think it might be more comfortable, but it also might provide more information for their clinicians, regardless on how that might play. But the neurotransmitter component, the stress component, all of that is a huge factor that I see. And I don't think there's always one specific reason. Even if it's like, okay, we have a low testosterone concern, or maybe there's a blood vessel, low nitric oxide, maybe there's things right there, or maybe we have nutrient levels. So I work with sometimes patients with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition where some people become allergic to actual gluten products, and it can affect their absorption, and it causes a lot of inflammation in their bodies. We know also gut health can also affect our mental health, right? So almost 50% of serotonin and dopamine are actually produced off of the gut. We know that there are certain genetic SNPs also that affect serotonin production, that affect 5-HTP, which is the precursor for serotonin. So I think that I think education is going to get better and also provide reassurance that you're not broken, number one. And there are a lot of things that we can do to support you.
Yeah. Do you envision a world, because I do wonder about this, especially with the work that I do. Do you envision a world where comprehensive treatment, assisted by AI machine learning, would include the psychological components? So if a man, let's say, goes for a AI bot or system that's specifically designed to assess and diagnose the etiology or pathologies of erectile dysfunction, that will get to a point where it can do a biopsychosocial assessment and come up with a comprehensive differential and really get into the weeds about different thought patterns, emotional states. Do you see that, maybe not in the next 5 or 10 years, but somewhere in the future for humankind?
Oh, yeah, I do. I think so. There's actually a lot coming out even just to support therapy and mental health, which is controversial, right? Because you want to make sure there's certain guardrails that are in place, right? Because like we talked about, AI and bots and one are certain, right? They're not meant to, they're meant to absorb information basically and then spit out based off of previous data and research and pattern recognition. But there's nothing about like, cognitive reasoning and being able to have empathy and pick up those little signs like, okay, this is a person that really needs help right now. This is a person that I think that we can create a treatment plan over a course of 3 months or 6 months or a year together. And I do think that the biopsychosocial model is expanding in multiple areas of medicine. But I think that it's becoming much more discussed in sexual health and in sexual medicine because we're now having conversations around why hormones are so important and that hormones are not just testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, right? We think about thyroid hormones, we think about our neurotransmitters, and all of these are messengers and chemical messengers in our body, and they have this beautiful integrative like network of how they work with each other and the sort of like this dance that happens because we're dynamic beings. And so I do think it's starting, and I think it's also because people are demanding it. I think people are actually becoming really more thoughtful and introspective. And people are starting to think about meditation and self, understanding self a little bit more. And people are listening to podcasts and they're kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit and they're trying to figure things out. And then they go and they bring it to their clinicians. And just case in point, we're seeing such a change just in the FDA recognizing and having conversations around hormone therapy. Like, hallelujah, right? Like, oh my goodness, like let's take the black box warning off of vaginal estrogen. And like testosterone is not the negative of that, what it's been told. Yeah, right. There's so many doctors who are scared of giving men testosterone or other options, right? Like Clomid or HCG, or understanding the interplay between the whole systems, and that these are not sex hormones, but they're life hormones. And they have really important roles throughout the body, including our cognitive function, our mood, and our mental health.
Yeah. So going back to the machine learning side of things, I'm sure our listeners are going to be interested to know. I don't know much about like the details of how machine learning is being incorporated into like medicine and research. I have no doubt that it's going on at lightning pace. Is there anything that you're aware of or know about that has come out or is showing promise in like the sexual health space that is like machine learning generated or supported? It really is giving us like a new angle or a new approach to some of the most prolific sexual health challenges.
So I think what I see the most right now is in cancer sector, because that's been one of the most challenging areas. So I will say like pancreatic cancer, which is pretty much usually found when it's in stage 4, they're seeing some amazing pickups, either 400+% faster than previously. And you're seeing like tremendous improvements in those areas. In terms of sexual health, what I see is more the digital twin. So I think sexual health is going to catch up there, but it's still considered, I think, probably in a lot of sectors, the nice to have versus like, oh my goodness, like this is an area of drug research and has the money to pursue it. But I do see the digital twin as a really cool an exciting component of what's happening right now. And the digital twin is in 2 different ways. The digital twin is usually it's a replica of the patient and with the same genomics, with the same understanding, whatever. And basically the biology, you're able to understand treatments or changes in their treatment plan and how it might affect them before you actually do it. So that's very cool, because if you're thinking about trying certain medications or trying certain nutrition programs or hormones or whatever it might be, you can see how that might affect that individual before you actually do it. So that's an exciting thing that's coming out. Then there's also the digital twin, obviously replica of the clinician, that is also helpful to have the patients interact with them. But for the sexual wellness, I see the digital twin absolutely being an exciting thing for probably clinicians in different areas, especially sexual medicine, where they can think about, if I, looking at this person, like we just talked about, multifactorial things are going on. What if we do this and do this? What are we looking at here? Do we think that this is going to help their blood vessels, their vasculature? It's going to help with, their body habitus, maybe their metabolic function, which is going to help them. So that's an exciting part. But drug research too, I think that's going to be great. So, again, for some people, like we talk about the peptides, like PT141, bremelanotide, Vyleesi, those came out to help support sexual function from more of a psychological component, right? Works on the neurotransmitters in the central nervous system. So now we're able to maybe look at some of those peptides and different therapies that don't have a ton of research behind them already to maybe enhance also for sexual wellness.
Yeah. Do you see a world where the PDE5 inhibitors, as we know them now, may be obsolete, meaning we might be able to get a either more enhanced or a compounded version that is more personalized to deliver better results? Or do you see that these are going to be like something you believe is here to stay for at least my health span personally?
Yeah, I have to say I love PDE5 inhibitors, and I use them a lot in my patients who don't even have specific sexual concerns. So because they're so good for your overall health and longevity. So I think it's great. I think we also see the revolution in there and the evolution, right? We see, and I know not to mention brand names, but I don't remember the generic name, but look at Stendra. So for the first time, like we had Viagra for a while, then we had beautiful Cialis. I love Cialis or Tadalafil. I think it's a great one. But then we came out with Stendra, and Stendra was even more powerful and helpful for a lot of men who are suffering and having the experience and the change with some of the others. But I think when we understand why you need to use them. So again, going back to what's the mechanism of action and why are you prescribing these medications for these individuals, right? Is there a way to stop the need for these medications? Meaning, like, if we make them more vascularly healthy, if we're able to improve nitric oxide production through the conversion of nitrates into nitrites, through the gut microbiome, through how our body utilizes nitric oxide, because a lot of these are contingent on also your amount of nitric oxide that's in your body. So is there a way to maybe decrease the need because we're doing other treatments to optimize the body to not have to go the route of pharmaceutical drugs? That would be interesting to see, right? And I think we're also seeing that with understanding, okay, well, gosh, like even estrogen for a man is so protective for his blood vessels, right? And so like, wow, if that man is losing his testosterone and he's not converting as much to estrogen or someone's putting him in an estrogen blocker, like Arimidex is used a lot in a little bit too, overtly, in my opinion, in some situations, and you're draining that man of that estrogen and his blood vessels are getting stiffer. And now he's having problems in other areas. My thought is, are we going to become smarter and understand the body better to either have better formulations of things, to your point, that are personalized to that individual, right? Of course, like really based on them, or we're not going to need to give it to them at all because we did better the first go around.
It's just thinking about it for a moment and being transparent. I mean, it's really an incredible world that you were describing, because I'm talking about like getting the medications refined to that person, and you're saying, well, who says we're going to have to do that anyways? Maybe like medication use will be a lot more limited because these tools will develop in a way that we can actually get to the root cause that's leading to, let's say, a limited vasodilation in the first place, and we can treat the root cause and not need the medication for at least some, perhaps maybe the vast majority of these patients, by approaching this from a totally different route, which is really like a bit of a mind twister. Like when you think about how deep some of these things can run.
If you could start working with someone very young, right, and in a way that's super supportive, and you have someone who's 18 years old, and now you're using AI to really understand, you're looking at their genomics, you're understanding their challenges, you understand that, and you have this sort of like evolution that happens, that when things start to break down, when that insulin level starts to increase, when that inflammation marker starts to go up, those micronutrients start to decline, where can we stop it there? Can we intervene and pivot before they have to go another 10, 15 years where they end up in your office or my office with concerns, right? With symptoms, with issues, whether or not we're having erectile dysfunction or cardiovascular concerns, right? So I'm super excited about the preventative approach of like, what can we do to slow down or even prevent the onset of these diseases?
Yeah, it really has a tremendous amount of promise. So I'm going to ask you as a question, just kind of wrap up here.
Yeah.
Do you see any like ethical like considerations when it comes to like AI machine learning, biohacking, and like where this may end up going for us as a helping health profession?
Yeah, I think using the right systems. So not using Chat GPT. Love Chat GPT for many things, but your health data is not protected. So I think people having an understanding of what they're saying and how it could be used in the future. How is their data? You have to learn about protection of data. We learned about 23andMe, right? A lot of people put their information out there. They had a big data breach, right? There's a lot of things that, right, we think about. But AI is only as good as data sets too. So I think that the challenge is going to be is how, number one, to make sure that clinicians still are paying attention and they're using it thoughtfully, and that at the end of the day they still have the say, right, to intervene, because we have the empathy, we have that oversight, and it's really important. And also putting guardrails into place to protect people. So again, from thinking from even what you do, right? You have a lot of people who might share information, and when you have to intervene a little bit faster, or maybe there's, we talk about suicide ideations. There are certain times when we're like, no, this is for us to help our patients, and we can't just sit back and rely on AI to give advice or to give medical insight without having us involved. So I think as long as we have these guardrails put into place, and the challenge is that AI grew really fast. A lot of these are direct to consumer. I still think there needs to be a direct to clinician and then clinician to consumer or patient. And we have to be thoughtful in the regulatory situation that we make sure people understand that if they are using something that's direct to consumer, like a Chat GPT, their data is not safe, and it is not a replacement for a clinician, a therapist, or a personal trainer or whomever, right? It can give some really nice insights, but ultimately those interventions should be overseen by a professional.
Ashley, this has been like fantastic, and I know that at some point, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm gonna look back at this episode, and I'm gonna have a good laugh just because like we're gonna be so integrated into just new ways of helping people, and I think the whole field is gonna look fundamentally different. But like from where we're standing right now, I think it's just really important just for like the listeners of the podcast to know that like we're all working tirelessly to figure out how to be more helpful to people and how to just continuously improve and utilize like all this technology. And while obviously there are risks and whatnot that come with it, I think the future is really bright for sexual medicine. And I think that
Yes.
we'll be able to help people in ways that are hard to even imagine at the current moment. And your insights into all of this is super helpful, super inspiring. So I really appreciate your time here on the podcast.
Thank you. This has been fun. And I totally agree. I think even in 6 months to a year, there's going to be an incredible bloom. And I think it's going to be helping so many people. It's also going to be helping us, right? You and I, who are, wanting to help more people on a greater platform. And I think it's going to help to also diminish some of the clinician burnout that we're seeing in a lot of different sectors of healthcare. So I'm excited. So thank you so much for having me today.
Of course. We'd love to have you again in the future.